All right. On that note, let's bring in Democratic Congressman Richie Torres of New York. He's a member of the Financial Services Committee. Congressman, always good to talk to you. Let's pick up that conversation about Medicaid cuts. I think it's important to bring these massive bills that can get so confusing and have so many different things in it to the street level. Let's go to the South Bronx and the district you represent. If this bill passes through the House, as most people expect it will, what does that mean for the residents of the South Bronx, for the people in your district?
Well, look, the so-called big, beautiful bill represents a betrayal of the working people of America, and nowhere more so than in the Bronx. When America sneezes, the Bronx gets the flu. The Bronx is going to be the hardest hit by the $1 trillion cut to Medicaid and children's health care. It's going to destabilize every health care provider, every hospital in my district. I have the highest rate of Medicaid enrollment in the country, 67%. So more than 70% of children, more than 80% of nursing home residents, more than 90% of baby deliveries are covered by Medicaid, which is going to be gutted at the hands of Donald Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. So it's a catastrophe for the working people of the Bronx.
You know, we've heard when challenged on this, leadership and members of the Trump administration dismissive of kind of what you laid out right there and said there's a lot of bloat in our entitlement system. We're merely making it more efficient. We're taking some of the burden off of the federal government. How do you respond to the claims by Republicans that say, oh, the concerns about this bill are overblown? It's going to create an economic explosion with these tax cuts at the top of the economy for wealthy people. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all the revenue that Republicans expect to generate from the cost cutting is simply going to be cannibalized by the higher interest payments on the debt. So the legislation at its core is a radical redistribution of wealth from the poor to the rich and from the American people to bondholders. And second, it's going to make Medicaid less efficient. So the work requirements on paper are actually paperwork requirements in practice. Experience tells us that work requirements simply leads to more paperwork. In 2018, the state of Arkansas put in place a work requirements program causing 18,000 people to lose access to health care. The majority of those people were working people who were eligible for Medicaid. And so experience tells us that work requirements will simply cause people to lose health care. It will simply bureaucratize Medicaid.
What does this mean for you politically for the next 2 years? J. Mark was talking about the cost of this to Republicans in the midterm elections. How do you see this playing out for Democrats? What should Democrats be doing? How should they be talking about this bill?
Look, the Republican reconciliation bill is not only bad morals, it's bad politics. I mean, it's going to cause 12 million people to lose their health care. It's going to slash Medicaid by $1 trillion, which is the largest health care cut in history.
In your district, how will people feel that between now and the midterms?
I think people will feel an overwhelming sense of betrayal.
Yeah. Okay, can we switch to the midterms on New York State? Because you're thinking about, obviously, your own political future, Congressman. The LG of New York, Antonio Delgado, is already in the race challenging incumbent Governor Kathy Hochul. Where is your head on next year? And are you planning to run for re-election or thinking about statewide still?
I'm unlikely to run
for governor.
I feel like the assault that we've seen on the social safety in the Bronx is so unprecedented, so overwhelming that I'm going to keep my focus on Washington, D.C. So my heart lies with Washington, D.C. I feel like now more than ever, we have to fight the catastrophe that is the Trump presidency.
Well, that's news.
On the question of Mamdani, we have spoken to Abigail Spanberger, Alyssa Slotkin, Hillary Schlotton from Michigan as well over the course of the last week. We've asked all of them what they think of his race. All of them have said they didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to say, They didn't want to comment on New York politics. But our politicians, our Democratic politicians who are not looking at that race and trying to learn something, if not about his policies, about the way he communicated his policies, missing something. It doesn't sound particularly authentic to say, this guy is up there running, but we don't know it in the New York City, but actually we're not going to comment on how he ran.
I feel like there's a difference between praising the man and his policies and praising the manner in which he ran his campaign. I mean, when it comes to how he ran his campaign, like he's genuinely a singular figure. I mean, he turned out 200,000 voters ages 18 to 44 for the first time were 50% of the electorate in New York City in a mayoral election. It was the highest turnout from 1989. Like, we do have an obligation to learn from his race. And I suspect he won not because he ran on divisive issues like globalize the Intifada or defund the police. Right. He ran on affordability, and there is a generation of young people who are struggling to cope with the crushing cost of housing, higher education, healthcare, who feel like the political establishment is catastrophically failing them. And you might disagree with his policy prescriptions, as I do, but he offered them a vision. And so that should be a challenge to the center left to offer its own compelling vision for affordability.
He's the Democratic nominee now for mayor of your hometown. Are you supporting his candidacy now?
Look, he's likely to win. We spoke on Sunday. We have profound differences of opinion, and I'm not going to downplay those differences. But I'm committed to a working relationship with him. I'm committed to continuing dialogue. You know, the mayor needs the New York City congressional delegation, and the New York City congressional delegation needs the mayor. It's a mutually necessary relationship, and so we will coexist.
Before we let you go, Congressman, do you expect anything other than Republicans to circle the wagons here and pass this massive piece of legislation, especially when they get the downward pressure from President Trump?
I mean, I feel like there's no set of people on earth who are more spineless, more lacking in backbone and integrity than congressional Republicans. And, you know, the Republican Party is no longer a normal political party. It's become a cult of personality. And their Lord and Savior is Donald Trump. Their loyalty lies not with the working people of America, but with their false idol, their false god, Donald Trump.
We'll see that vote perhaps in the next couple of days. Democratic Congressman Richie Torres of New York. Congressman, thanks as always. We appreciate it.